From this farmhouse, one morning at the beginning of the last century, a young man called James Wilson set forth for the United States. On board ship, he met a girl called Annie Adams from a nearby village. They married and had 10 children, and the 10th they called Joseph. And Joseph Wilson's son Woodrow became President of the United States. The Wilson family still farm this land, and Woodrow Wilson is only one among a dozen presidents of the United States whose people come from hereabouts, because this is Northern Ireland, home of the American dream. Northern Ireland is the ancestral home of the people who are sometimes known in the United States as the Scotch-Irish. Now, that is not an expression that is used here. Here, when they say Scotch, they mean whiskey. When they say Irish, they often mean whiskey too. The Scotch-Irish are the Ulster-Scots. They are the descendants of the Presbyterians from Scotland who were settled here in the 17th century at the behest of King James I. This was the plantation of Ulster, and they were the planters. Just as the English settlers, also egged on by King James, were the planters in Virginia. And the Ulster-Scots became Ulster men. But in the 18th century, 250,000 of them were to leave Ulster. The native Irish, mostly Catholic, were to leave too, 4 million of them in the 19th century. But that's another and perhaps more familiar story. The Presbyterian Ulstermen who left a century earlier left because the English thwarted everything that they held dear: their agriculture, their industry, and their religion. They were denied markets, they were denied office, and they were denied religious equality. So they upped and they left. And they sailed across the Atlantic to America. And there these Presbyterian Ulstermen became Americans, and in the process helped to create America. They were the instrument and the inspiration of its independence, its expansion, its education, and its dreams. They, above all people, grasped that America was the land of opportunity, and they were prepared to work for it. They were the frontiersmen. Davy Crockett and Sam Houston were among them. And as you walk around the Ulster American Folk Park here at Camp Hill in County Tyrone, you can understand why. Theodore Roosevelt, whose mother's family, the Bullocks, came from County Antrim, had this to say of them. They were a grim, stern people, strong and simple, powerful for good and evil, relentless, revengeful, suspicious, knowing neither ruth nor pity. They were of all men, he said, the best fitted to conquer the wilderness and to hold it against all comers. The old world they left and the new world they built had much in common, because they took with them their way of life, their love of learning and of religion, and their simple chattels. The world they left is now preserved at the Ulster Folk Museum at Coltraw in County Down. Some were so poor that they had to sell themselves as indentured servants to pay their passages. Others were men of substance, able to sell up at home, buy their tickets, and set themselves up in the new world. But all were united in the belief that this new world was the future. They settled in Pennsylvania, in West Virginia, and in the Carolinas. Some went south to Georgia. Some pushed inland to Kentucky and Tennessee. By 1776, there were 123 Ulster settlements in America. They are, said Benjamin Franklin, in a fair way to taking possession of the state. And when it came to the crunch, the Ulstermen were not torn like the English settlers between love of the old country and the colonial cause. They were the servants and the soldiers of the American Revolution. They led the fight for independence, and some would say were responsible for the war itself. 5 Ulstermen put their names to the Declaration of Independence. A 6th, Charles Thompson, was the Secretary of the Congress that adopted it, and a 7th, John Dunlap, printed it. John Dunlap learned his trade at this printing shop in the main street of Strabane. Dunlap founded the first daily newspaper in America, the Pennsylvania Packet. He was the first of many Ulster-Scots newspaper men. But back to the Revolution. George Washington said that if defeated, he would make his last stand for liberty among these people. His Secretary of War, James McHenry, was from Ballymena. His best soldier, General Henry Knox, his father was from Derry. But in the Civil War, Ulstermen fought on both sides. For the North, General Ulysses S. Grant, and for the South, perhaps the South's greatest general, Stonewall Jackson, great-grandson of John Jackson, who left the shores of Lough Neagh in 1748 for the far shores of the Atlantic. Only one man beat Stonewall Jackson, General James Shields, who was born in Altmore in County Tyrone. So they went, they conquered, and they prospered. Thomas Mellon, who was born in this cottage, a cottage built by his father and his brother with their own hands, left here at the age of 5 when his family emigrated to America. They settled in Turtle Creek, Pennsylvania, and young Thomas was on the way to becoming a judge, a banker, and the father of Andrew Mellon, Secretary to the United States Treasury and the richest man in America. Mellon money restored this homestead and paid for the folk park which surrounds it. And old Judge Mellon never forgot this cottage in which he was born. He came back here 64 years after he had left, and he said it was all in every particular just as he had seen it as a child and still remembered it. Although it was another Ulsterman, Major General Robert Ross of Ross-Trevor, who burned down the Whitehouse in 1814, the contribution of Ulstermen to American history is best displayed in the catalogue of presidents. From Andrew Jackson to the present century, presidents have claimed Ulster connections, and 14 of them almost certainly have Ulster ancestry, and 3 of them were first-generation Americans. Men of direct Ulster descent occupied the White House for 56 of the 92 years between the inauguration of Andrew Jackson and the termination of Woodrow Wilson's 8 years in office. Andrew Jackson's parents lived in Bonnie before they emigrated to America. When they set sail from the little harbour under the shadow of Carrickfergus Castle, Andrew's mother must already have been pregnant, because he claimed he was born soon after the ship in which they sailed reached harbour in America. He grew up to lead the army of frontiersmen against the British in the Battle of New Orleans and earned himself the nickname Old Hickory, and then became president in 1829. The family home of James Buchanan is tucked away in the fold of the hills in Duroran in County Tyrone. Buchanan's father emigrated to Philadelphia early in the last century, probably to join Buchanan's already there. The ancestors of Ulysses S. Grant, hero of the Civil War, were born in this cottage near Auchnacloy in County Tyrone. Grant, who succeeded Johnson as president, was a great drinker. During the Civil War, somebody had complained to Lincoln that General Grant drank too much whiskey. "Find out his brand," said Lincoln, "and give it to the others." I like to think it was this one. They've been making this, it says on the bottle here, since 1608. No wonder Grant came back on a visit. William Arthur, the father of Chester Allen Arthur, was born in this fine farmhouse at Cullybackey. William set off from here for New York in 1797. Chester was born in 1830, the last first-generation American to become president. William McKinley was the great-great-grandson of James McKinley, who left this farm in Connacher, County Antrim, to sail to America in 1743. To this day, this farm, which is close to the River Bush, is known as McKinley's Farm. Which brings us back to Woodrow Wilson and to the Wilson homestead near Strabane. Woodrow Wilson's grandfather James, who lived here, served his apprenticeship at the very same printing shop in Strabane as John Dunlap, who printed the Declaration of Independence. It was a letter from Dunlap which probably persuaded James Wilson to emigrate, because in it Dunlap wrote, "The young men of Ireland who wish to be free and happy should leave it and come here as quick as possible. There is no place in the world where a man meets so rich a reward for conduct and industry as in America." And that says it all. So, if your name is Wilson, or Jackson, or Thompson, or Simpson, or Taylor, or Logan, or Blair, and there are 20 million of you in the United States, then the chances are that your roots are here in Northern Ireland. And when I called on Kathleen Neal, who is the secretary of the Ulster Historical Foundation, I discovered that some Americans from Ulster had risen even higher than president.
3 American astronauts had their roots here in Northern Ireland. There was John Glenn, whose family came from Coleraine, Neil Armstrong from County Fermanagh, and also Jim Irwin. His family came from County Tyrone.
Are you besieged with Americans who want to know if their roots are here?
We have an average of 500 letters every month, and I would say that the majority of them, about 60 to 70% of those, are from America.
And can you help them?
We can help about 80% of the people in some way. Some are, of course, much more successful than others, depending on the information that they can provide us with to start.
In the search for roots, then, is this a rich field to explore?
The wealth of material available in Northern Ireland for genealogical research amazes the majority of the Americans who come here. And we find they're not only amazed at the sheer volume of material, they're also amazed at how easy it is to get to Northern Ireland. The majority of them don't realize that we're only 1 hour by shuttle from London.
Have you had any exciting finds?
I think the Irwin one, Jim Irwin, was the most exciting, because not only did we find his family home, we also found relatives who were still living there. And although they knew all about the astronaut and the relationship, and had indeed been following his career with great interest, he had no idea that they ever existed.
So, if your roots are here, then it should be easy to discover them. What is certain is that America's roots are here. So why don't you come and see for yourself? They make it even easier for you now with a heritage trail through this lovely countryside. And you can be sure of a welcome from the Wilsons.